I'm John Michael Bailey, and welcome to the Wellspring Digital Chat. This is where we capture, we sequester digital marketing brains. We plug them into all sorts of devices. We extract all sorts of useful information, and then we release them back into the wild. So today we have an SEO, a self-described marketing technologist, a keynote speaker who is one of my favorites, who I've seen speak before, search marketer of the year, and last but not least, a rapper. So I first met Mike when we were speaking at a digital summit conference, which I miss dearly, going to those someday. Anyway, Mike, please go ahead and introduce yourself to these good folks.
Yeah, the only thing I would add that you didn't say is I'm also a dad of two beautiful children.
Probably the most important thing.
Yeah. So my background is first in computer science. Then I made music for a living. Then I started working at agencies. After a few years of doing that, I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure I could do a better job myself. And here we are 7 years later, and I'm not completely wrong. So my agency, iPullRank, we're based here in New York City, but who's based anywhere at this point, because we're all working from home, and home can be anywhere.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's funny you say sequestered, because that's how I feel in this pandemic. But yeah, that's who I am. That's what I do.
Yeah, we're all it's like we're stuck in some like very strange reality TV show where our only contact with real life is through video screens. Very bizarre. So it's not every day that we get to interview a search marketer of the year. So I expect big answers from you. This is pretty exciting. So it should be great for all the marketing peeps listening here as well. So let's do this. So
Cool.
Google recently made the official shift to mobile first indexing in September of last year. In a recent post where you argue that this will cause the biggest shakeup in SEO this year, you say that, quote, that all those sites that are rendering less content on mobile are about to have a bad time. First, I really hope that that's a South Park reference.
Of course.
Second, all right, awesome. Perfect. Great. I feel a meme coming on. Second, can you explain what you mean in somewhat non-SEO terminology?
Yeah. So, when people make websites for mobile devices, they assume that people want less content. And so generally speaking, people will serve less content on mobile than they do on desktop. And thus far, that's been relatively okay, because Google will crawl in both contexts. Like, they'll look at the page as a user might see it in mobile, they'll look at it in desktop, and then they make a determination of like, okay, which of these do we want to actually use for putting into Google itself, right? But the problem is, we did some research as part of this big study we did for the Web Almanac, and only 16.29%, I think it was, of pages showed the same content on mobile and desktop.
Which I was totally surprised by.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Crazy.
And so Google is making a shift to only indexing the mobile context. So only what's being shown on mobile. And so when that shift happens, because there's going to be so many differences and so much less content, any site that doesn't have parity between those two contexts is going to lose rankings, because Google is going to see a lot less of that content. So, a lot of the focus this year has been on core web vitals, which is those speed measures that Google is adding to the algorithm. But, I think that's going to be a relatively small change, whereas seeing less content in the index for the majority of the web is going to cause a significant change to rankings.
Yeah, I mean, when you make the case that way, it's like it kind of causes a little bit of a holy crap moment for a lot of people, I would imagine. So
yeah, and the thing is that most tools don't natively show you your tools aren't automatically going to look at every context and make these comparisons and say, hey, you have this problem, because it's just too computationally expensive for a lot of these tools to do things like that.
Which you made a tool, speaking of parity, You made a little tool, free tool, introduced it to the world in that same post called, is it Para2 or Parato or how?
Pareto.
Pareto. It's putting the wrong accent. Okay, so I'd love to hear more about that tool, but what I really want to ask is, this is your magic moment. What tools are missing in the world of SEO? Like, if you could develop one magic tool, what would it be and why?
Yeah. So first, Pareto is the tool that does the things that I just said most tools don't do, right? What it does is it crawls your page 8 times and it makes comparisons to see, you know, what is missing on those different contexts.
And I'll link to Pareto in this post below, definitely, because it's really cool.
And to your question of like, what would I build? I mean, you know, first, there's just like a lot of problems with SEO tools, right? Like one of the questions that I ask in our interviews for SEO engineers is, what is something that a popular tool doesn't do and how do you account for it? Because as an example, you know, all the link indices, well, no, not all of them. Majestic does allow you to do this, but some of the other link indices don't allow you to get all the data that they have on a given site. So let's say, for instance, we're talking about, you know, a website like adidas.com and they've got hundreds of millions of links. There's no way for you to get that data out and then use it. But the bigger problem that I see across SEO tools is that it requires you to take the data out to be able to do all these different, you know, extractions and transformations and so on to the data to get to the insights that you want, right? Like they're not doing enough natively. And so you're like, cool, give me the CSV and then I'll turn it into a data scientist. And what I would prefer is if you had that capability basically natively in the tool. And I think Botify does a great job of this, where it's like you can take any 2 data points or any number of data points and cross tabulate them, where it's like, all right, I want to know about this URL, you know, give me a view of whatever data points that I want, and then you can extract it if you want, or there's a lot of different analyses you can do within the tool itself. So what I would build would be more like, you know, a better all-in-one platform. You know, one that is like natively has the capabilities to get to those insights that you want. Something like a SEM Rush, but just more data analysis capabilities built into it. But another thing that I would build, and just kind of speaking on SEM Rush, because they're a public company now, and I feel like it's okay. I feel like the data set that they have the capability potentially of looking at changes like over time, because they track rankings every day for millions of websites. Right. And so they could potentially do something, whether it's just like simple regressions or whatever, like, you know, a variety of different models, and say, based on the changes that we saw on this day, here's what we think happened in the algorithm. Like they should be able to parse that out for you and kind of give you, you know, a report, just a data-driven report. Obviously, you would still want to qualitatively review those types of things, but I think that there is an opportunity for them to, you know, not only just be reactive to what happened, but also potentially predict what may happen because they just have such a large data set. So I am a developer, and so I am in the process of building tools.
I had a feeling.
But, you know, things like that are like my big picture things. Like, yeah, I think someone should do this.
Yeah, hopefully you didn't give away any trade secrets that.
So yeah, I don't have any inside knowledge on what SEM Rush is doing.
No, maybe they're paying attention, and we could start a tool war where see who builds the better dashboard. No, it's funny you say that, because we have a saying here at it's Carl's saying, which is don't trust the tools. You know, it's just like it's unfortunate, but yeah, you need like 3, 4, 5 different tools to get all the information and the data that you want.
Right. And just going back to this idea of like link indices, when we do a backlink audit, we don't just like log into the tool and like grab screenshots and say, oh, it's got a DA of 40 or whatever. You know, we download all the links from everywhere and then we crawl them ourselves, because a lot, like by the time that, because those link indices are so big, it's difficult for them to crawl everything, you know, and have the data be up to date. Right. And so you need to do that and say, okay, well, it looks like 40% of these links are actually broken, and your tool wouldn't have been able to tell you that. It'll tell you to some degree, right? But like, you're not going to have complete accuracy. And yeah, to the point of not trusting the tool, I'm completely on board with that. You got to validate that data. It's just, you know, the reality of data.
Absolutely. You have a rank and file, which I love the name, video series. You ask and answer the question, does SEO take 6 months? And I love your answer, and I will link to it here because it's so well thought out and said, and we'll just leave it at that. But what I want to ask is, in your experience, how much of an impact does alignment have on the success of any digital marketing effort? Because in your answer, you talk about alignment as being a key to the success of SEO, but is it broader than that? Do you think it's digital marketing or marketing wide or even company wide that alignment is crucial today?
100%. You know, it's crucial to everything you're doing in a company or any team environment, right? Like, because you've got a whole bunch of people going in different directions, you're not going to get anywhere. And so, you know, bringing that point up in the terms of SEO just kind of like clarifies that it's not just about like, oh, well, how long does it take to do an audit, or how long does it take for Google to crawl the site, which was the historical thinking, because Google did used to take a long time to recrawl a website. But the reality of it is that, you know, where they're at with their technology, their computing power and resources, it does not take them a long time. And so it's really about how long is it going to take you and your organization to actually get things done. And that's the real variable, right? Because it comes down to prioritization in the organization. It comes down to people trusting you. It comes down to, you know, can we actually do the things that we planned? And it's very easy to be like, oh, well, you just, you know, put rel canonical tags and do 301 redirects and all this. The problem is you're saying just. It's not just. It is an effort that requires people to get educated and also make time for doing the thing that you want. And we all know that's never easy in an organization.
And I mean, I think it's fair to say that it's only gonna, the need for alignment and the need for, you know, cross-organization cooperation, if you will, is only going to increase as these systems get more complex and, you know, more things are thrown into the mix.
And the other thing is that, you know, SEO is inherently cross-functional, right? Like there's no just like, okay, I'm gonna sit in the corner and do SEO. Like, no, you got to talk to a variety of different teams, whether that's strategy, marketing, product development, you know, operations. Like there's a whole bunch of content, there's a whole bunch of different teams that you've got to get in alignment. So it's always going to be difficult. Like it's always going to be, unless you're, you know, a small company of 5 people or you're doing a website yourself or whatever, you're always going to have difficulty getting the team to, you know, inch forward on this thing, like a football team, basically.
I don't know. I've seen some 5-person companies that are very much out of alignment. So I don't think size makes that much of a difference. It's more about personality at that point. So
fair enough.
Yeah. So in a recent Search Engine Journal post, you say that you believe Google's assertion that clicks are not direct ranking factors to be a semantic argument, which I love that phrase. And I feel like people are constantly looking for Google to, you know, answer a question outright and definitively, like Google says. But, you know, is that possible considering, you know, the complexity of their systems and processes? In other words, is relying on Google for all your SEO answers a mistake?
Yeah, I think if you do that, you're also going to have a bad time because, you know, they can only say so much for a variety of reasons, not just like, you know, we don't want to give you the algorithm or whatever, but there's also just like a lot of like, what's the word, where they would be on the hook for it. I can't remember the word.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But anyway,
liability, I guess.
Right. A lot of liability that would create. And so, but part of it is that the vocabulary that a lot of those people use is different from the vocabulary that we use in SEO, right? Like some of them,
absolutely,
right, and they're speaking they're speaking more on like the information retrieval
Yep.
level when they're talking about things, because they are building an information retrieval system. Effectively, SEOs are users of that system who have their own vocabulary to describe things because they don't necessarily know the nuts and bolts and all of that type of stuff. And so sometimes when they say things to us, we interpret it in the wrong way because we don't know the vocabulary that they're using. We don't know the basis of these types of systems. And when we talk about, you know, this idea of, I think I was referring to this idea of them using clicks or not using clicks or whatever. And so in information retrieval, using clicks is a base level thing that is done to determine whether or not a session was successful. And Paul Haar, who is a search engineer over at Google, he gave a talk a few years ago at SMX where he talked about like how for evaluation, when they're testing to see if the results are good or not, they do use clicks to determine whether or not there was a successful session. And so where I say that argument is semantic is Google says they're doing tests every day. And we know they use clicks to inform these tests. We also know that you could be in a cohort for testing at any given point, right? So like we've seen a number of times where Rand and Eric Inga have done that that test where they've said, okay, let's click this a whole bunch of times, get a whole bunch of people to do it, and we see it pop up, right? So that could be a function of, you know, being in the cohort that a test is actively running in. We don't necessarily know because they could slice these cohorts in any number of ways.
Right.
But they also have a patent that's I think it's called time-based ranking, where if a certain number of clicks happen within a certain time frame, a ranking will change. Like that will go up higher in the rankings. So a patent doesn't necessarily mean that they're running it, it's active, it's something that is in production, but it does mean that someone thoughtfully considered it. And we are seeing direct impact from that. So it suggests that there is something in there that does react to clicks. They make arguments all the time about clicks being noisy, which makes sense. But the reality of it is there is something in there related to clicks.
Well, and there's also I asked Dwayne Forrester a similar question, and his answer was great. He's like, you know, there's also times when Google doesn't know. They've built this crazy system, and it's like this black hole of algorithms and data sets that they can't answer the question directly. It's not possible.
Yeah, and that is also true. You know, the reality of it is when you're talking about machine learning systems, and if you've got, let me take a step back. So we talk about the algorithm like it's one thing.
Right.
That's not true, right? It's like a series of microservices that all interact with each other to then ultimately compose a series of results, right? And so when you think about, you know, how those can all interact, if you got a series of different machine learning models across this, you don't necessarily know why the system made the determinations that it did. Right. You just know that you built this part that does this thing and it outputs that, but you don't know how it got there. Right. And so you can completely expect that, you know, someone can't, you know, completely tell you how something ranks, but you do know what their inputs were, or they do know what their inputs are, and they do know what the outputs are. So end of the day, you know, yeah, it's probably difficult to say like, okay, well, we added this to that, and then it created these rankings. But they do know what they wrote to actually get to that point.
I'm really scared for when the day that Google starts mass producing robots.
Pretty sure they already do.
Right? Yeah, publicly mass producing robots. Yeah. So all right. So if you'll bear with me, I want to ask you my Barbara Walters / Oprah Winfrey style question. So you are a rapper. So far we've had an SEO that plays guitar, Dwayne Forrester, and actually builds guitars. We've had an SEO that DJs and plays the drums, Lily Ray. And now we have an SEO who is also a rapper. So I want to ask you, are there any similarities between SEO and rap?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's
So
cool. That's the answer I was hoping for.
my experience of this has been very similar, right? Like I kind of have analogs in that, you know, writing a blog post is like writing a song. Giving a conference talk is like doing a show. It's really similar in that, like when I rap for a living, I was just flying around the world and jumping on stages and showing you what I got. It's the same thing I do as a speaker.
Right.
And it's a similar like creative outlet for me, you know, in the way where it's like I put something together and I'm so excited about it. And there's like a creative aspect to it, but there's also like a science aspect to it as well. And then, you know, I just can't wait to put it out and see what the reaction is. And then, you know, ultimately, once you put the song out, it's no longer your song. People do something else with it. They create experiences around it. Same thing about in writing for SEO, because, you know, ultimately, people learn something from it and then they alter it and they do something else. And then you'll see, you know, someone else write another post that's like tangentially related, and you see how you influence that and so on. And then, you know, when I get on stage and I give a conference talk, first thing I say is make some noise. You know, I get people like hype and you know, ready to be engaged and so on.
Because they've been there like all day.
Exactly. And so, you know, I design my decks in the same way that I design my sets, where it's like peaks and valleys and how it's being presented. And it just, again, keeps people engaged. So definitely a very similar experience. And also on the technical side, which you may not think that about rap, because, you know, there are people that are considered technical rappers in the same way that people are considered technical SEOs. And so, you know, the way you structure bars and structure verses and so on, there are technical components to it, right? Because like you can rap and you can be rapping like, you know, cat, hat, bat, and things like that. Or you can make your syllables rhyme in minimal time like that. You see what I'm saying? And so the multi-syllable matching is a very technical thing that can be stacked in a variety of ways. So technical SEO is obviously very similar to that. So rap and SEO for me have been a complete analog. And I definitely felt as though I was prepared to do this by what I did in rapping.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm not a professional, but I play the drums and I write music with people, and it's a lot of like problem solving and mapping and you know, arrangement, and you know, and almost in a way, you know, there are data sets in a song, you know, just like bits and pieces of information that you're kind of rearranging, and that's
and you know, rap, I think I was always a structured thinker, but rap actually forced me to you know, kind of codify how I do my structured thinking, right? Like a lot of my rhymes were extended metaphors. And so, you know, what you have to do is like collect a bunch of information, structure it, and then figure out a way to make it clever and make it fit together. And then also that whole layer of like the rhyme schemes that I was just talking about. All of that is like, okay, learning that and doing it in a creative way, but there's again a bit of a science aspect of it, prepares you for something like SEO that is very ambiguous, that you then have to like pull in different pieces and figure out how it works.
Okay, so bonus question. You're from Philly.
I am.
Is Black Thought the best freestylist alive?
He's one of them.
There's one viral video where
the 10-minute one.
Like,
dude. Yeah. Here's the thing. Like, it all depends on how you define freestyle, right? Like, because there's the what we call off the head freestyle, where it's like nothing was pre-prepared.
Right.
And then there is what you saw in that video, which was like a series of different rhymes that he weaved together in real time. I'm not trying to take anything away from it.
No, because
that video was completely amazing. But there are also people that can freestyle off the top of their head,
which is incredible,
to a similar level that Black Thought kicked that series of written rhymes. So when I think freestyle, I think of that. And that's more, you know, like the world that I've come from. But I completely and deeply respect anyone who writes something as amazing as the bars that Black Thought spit in that freestyle.
So, and the last thing is, I wish I had you around when I tried to explain rap music to my 76-year-old father, because he's a nerd and a engineer and a developer, and he would have totally appreciated that explanation. He would have been like a huge rap fan from that point forward. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at someone like Eminem as an example, because he is one of the most technical rappers ever. Like you mostly, when most people think of him, you just think of like the shock value and so on. But like, he has some of the craziest structures to his raps ever.
It's wild.
Ever.
It's crazy. All right, well, that's a great place to leave it, because I got nowhere to go from there. I think that's a great place to leave it. So, Mike, thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate this. I think there's a lot here that people will get. So that's it, man. Stay safe, stay sane. Hopefully we see each other at a conference again soon.
Yep. Get your vaccinations, everybody.
Yeah.
Believe in
that. Get it. Do it. Do it. So, all right.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.